Men must be superior. God created us first. Silly, men just provided the raw material like a rib from which to make its truly superior creation, woman. Yeah, but the woman is supposed to be his companion. Of course we are. You can't be left to run things alone, especially if there are sharp tools nearby. Well, it's still us men who win the wars. That's only fitting. You men start almost all of them, and hundreds of millions have died as a result, and without much peace to show for it. So much of what we see is a product of where we're standing. And if not that, then from the mirror into which we gaze. This is the Practicing Christian, and this week's report is asking, what are your pronouns and adjectives? Innocence or ignorance is not always a good defense. At one point in the 4th grade in a New York City school, our teacher asked each of us about what our nationality was. Over the blackboard, she had hung a pictorial map of the USA with areas of ethnic dominance, for example, Norwegians in the Dakotas, indicated by small drawn figures like lumberjacks or farmers, and areas of other nationalities, such as Japanese or Italian. When my turn came, I said, innocently and ignorantly, American. Further efforts on her part to elicit something alien like Serbian or Irish failed. I did, however, recall that a great-grandfather of mine in Maine had been Penobscot. That helped a little. But the most common way that people identify us is neither by nationality nor by faith, it's by sex. And I have a birth certificate documentation that proves what I am. Not to mention 2 sons and a beard. But as many of you have experienced, this is inadequate for some others of us. We may want others to have a further gender identification. If pressed, I admit to having several other pronouns and adjectives by which I can be identified, but they aren't gender involved. This questioning is often, but not always, unidirectional. That means I'm not asking them about their genders. I can understand why some might ask me if they were, for example, selling insurance or considering getting romantically involved with me. But that's not a daily event, for sure. So I've tried to think of what might be a good pronoun, even if gender-related or unrelated, for me to use to steer any other questioning into a more productive direction. I don't want to use my political identity. That can be worse than gender explorations. Nowadays, when someone asks me, what are your pronouns? I reply simply, biblical. I don't ask what he means because I know what he's after, and it would just give him an opportunity to lecture me. So with the word Christian. For if he's fairly sophisticated, he might well mount an argument based on some variant of Christian men's understandings. And it is an appalling failure for anyone to reply to such an argument with, well, they aren't real Christians. Saying biblical also gives me cover, as it might anyone, and time to think for other practicing Christians who may be more unprepared and more unorganized in answering such a question. Biblical allows me to explain that I, or another person, simply a man, as in Matthew 5:27, or a faithful man, as in 2 Timothy 2:2, or a man who tries to be a servant of God, as in John 16:7, or a family man, as in 1 Timothy 5:4. There are so many adjectives used in the Bible that can be added to man. Some such are sensible, kind, honorable, helpful, open-hearted, godly, trustworthy, cheerful, and obedient. Now, of course, these adjectives or pronouns don't go to the heart of what your questioner is asking of you, but they do go to the heart of who you are and who it's important for you to be. And this is something that is truly worth communicating to any man or woman who's pressing you to define yourself only in terms of the current anxieties of sometimes unfaithful people. There are many biblical pronouns and adjectives that describe a faithful Christian. When stated by a faithful Christian, by responding this way, you're inviting him to consider that there are the real qualities that your friend or acquaintance might use to define his own manhood. And they could be these qualities, and that would provide satisfaction and a deeply valuable life. He may need to hear this. He certainly won't hear it from someone who shares his approach to manhood, or who only wants you to argue with him. Our world has thrown up images of manhood for us to consider that are sometimes tortuous to explore, often insidious and desperate venues of retreat. One list of the 100 greatest novels in the last century gives positions 1 and 3 to James Joyce. His portrayal of the artist as a young man and Ulysses are still widely absorbed. The author enjoyed prostitutes and had as a protagonist in Ulysses a man who spent 10 years of his marriage unwilling or unable to be intimate with his wife, or even to begin to deal with it. He likely had syphilis for years, perhaps to his medical detriment, and is described as a curious mixture of sinister genius and uncertain talent, and also is regarded as one of the most influential and important writers of the 20th century. The work of James Joyce still has a profound influence on contemporary culture. He is required or recommended reading in many schools. We may admire a man's skill with words, even electing them to the presidency or to the ministry of our churches, but we need not drape ourselves with the characteristics of their faith or faithfulness, the adjectives of their own peculiarities, ambiguities, or dreams. We must always be at work on our own dreams and pronouns, our best ambitions and adjectives, such as, I'm trying to be the best dad I can. Jesus is a good model for Christians, but we need to remember we've not been called to walk Jerusalem into our execution. Practicing Christians are always looking for the work of the Spirit within themselves and becoming the sort of man that God hopes for us to be. Each of those men who talk with you about your pronouns may be a man who can truly be open to, and maybe is desperate to find, the Spirit of God. If he hears from you how the Spirit has guided your own manhood, your Spirit-guided pronouns and adjectives. Serve then, be the king's right arm.